Spring 1974. Two farmers stand at a fence line in Cass County, Nebraska, staring at identical sections of prairie land, 320 acres each, homesteaded by their grandfathers in the 1880s. One farmer is about to make a decision that will save his family's legacy for generations. The other is about to lose everything, and neither of them knows it yet. Dale Kruger, 42, runs his hand along the weathered fence post. He's cautious by nature, farming with a 1958 John Deere 720 and equipment that's seen better days. Across the fence stands Carl Hoffman, 39, ambitious and confident, practically glowing with excitement about the gleaming green machine parked in his yard. "You need to do this," Carl says, gesturing toward his brand new John Deere 4430, $48,000. Finance it over 7 years and watch what happens. Dale, this is the future. You're leaving money on the table. Dale nods politely, says he'll think about it, but something in his gut screams wrong. 5 years later, Carl's farm is being auctioned off by the bank. Dale is still farming with that same old 720, completely debt-free, watching his neighbor's life disintegrate piece by piece. What happened between those two moments isn't just about one bad decision. It's about the deadliest trap ever set for American farmers, a trap that would destroy over 235,000 family farms in less than a decade. But here's what nobody tells you about that trap. Carl did everything right. Between 1973 and 1974, American agriculture experienced what looked like a golden age. Corn spiked to over $3 per bushel. Soybeans hit $12. Farmers who'd struggled for years were suddenly printing money. A farmer with 320 acres was looking at gross revenue over $115,000, more than many had made in the previous 5 years combined. The financial industry saw opportunity. Banks saw farmers sitting on land appreciating at 15–20% annually. Land that sold for $600 per acre in 1970 was hitting $1,200 by 1974, with projections to reach $2,000 within years. To lenders, this looked risk-free, valuable collateral, strong cash flow. And equipment manufacturers, they were producing machines that represented genuine technological leaps. The John Deere 4430, 125 horsepower, turbocharged, enclosed cab with air conditioning, a machine that could let one man farm twice the acres in half the time. Cost $48,000, more than most farmers' annual net income, but dealers made it seem painless. 7-year loans at 8–9% interest, monthly payments around $750. You'll cover that with increased productivity, the salesman promised. What nobody emphasized, what dealers glossed over, what bankers soft-pedaled, what agricultural economists barely mentioned, was that this entire structure was built on assumptions never tested over a full economic cycle. The assumption that commodity prices would stay high, that land values would keep rising, that interest rates would remain stable, that nothing could go seriously wrong. These assumptions weren't based on historical precedent. They were based on 2 or 3 years of unusual conditions being treated as permanent trends. Dale understood this instinctively. He'd grown up during the Depression, watched his father nearly lose the farm in the 1950s. His father had told him something at 16, working harvest. The minute you owe money on equipment, you're not working for yourself anymore. You're working for the bank. Dale never forgot. Carl Hoffman, though, he was a true believer, and he wasn't stupid. He'd done the math, talked to his accountant, his banker, the extension agent. Everyone agreed. Upgrading was the smart move. If he could expand to 480 acres with modern equipment, the economics would really kick in. He went to the dealer, signed papers for the 48,000 tractor, plus a 12,000 planter and 6,000 plow. Total equipment package, 66,000 financed. Monthly payment, $1,000. Annual, $12,000. Seemed reasonable when corn was 3 a bushel. That summer, Carl stopped at Dale's place, found him cultivating with the old 720. No cab, no air conditioning, just a metal seat and umbrella. "You're killing yourself running that dinosaur," Carl called out. "Buy a 4430. You won't regret it." Dale climbed down, shirt soaked with sweat. Can't afford it, Carl. Finance it. That's what I did. Dale shook his head. I don't like owing money. Carl's expression shifted to something between pity and condescension. That's old thinking. Modern farming requires capital investment. Dale didn't argue, just went back to cultivating. The 1974 season was excellent. Carl's 320 acres averaged 122 bushels per acre. He sold at $2.85 per bushel. Gross revenue $111,380. After operating costs of $60,000, more fuel, more fertilizer, more chemicals, higher maintenance, he netted $51,380. After equipment payments of $12,000, $39,380. Spectacular. Carl felt vindicated, bought a new pickup, took his wife to Colorado, started talking about buying another 160 acres. Dale's acres yielded 118 bushels at $2.70 per bushel. Gross, $102, $130. His costs were dramatically lower. Conservative fertilizer, no equipment payments. Total costs, $38,000. Net, $64,130. Dale made $25,000 more than Carl on the same acreage with lower yields, simply because he had no debt. But here's the crucial part. Both men felt confirmed in their choices. Carl saw his $40,000 profit as proof the investment paid off. Dale saw his $64,000 as proof his conservative approach worked. Neither understood they were looking at an outlier year, not the new normal. And Carl, buoyed by success, made his second critical mistake. Early 1975, he bought that 160 acres from a retiring neighbor. Cost $320,000, $2,000 per acre, the peak of the market, though nobody knew it yet. He put down $64,000, basically all his 1974 profit, and financed the rest. Annual payment, $25,920. Carl now owed $38,000 per year in equipment and land payments, but he wasn't worried. He was farming 480 acres now, 50% more land. The math still worked on paper. Dale watched from across the fence line with growing unease. Carl wasn't farming anymore. He was servicing debt. The market turned in 1975, not catastrophically, but enough. Corn drifted to $2.35 per bushel. For Carl, farming 480 acres with good yields, this was painful but survivable. After operating costs and payments, he walked away with about $10,000 for a year of brutal work. Dale's 320 acres netted $46,280, made more than 4 times what Carl made farming a third less land, because he had no debt, but farmers don't share financial details, so Carl assumed everyone was struggling equally. Then 1976 brought weather problems, late spring, excessive wetness, fungal diseases. Carl's yields dropped to 98 bushels per acre. Prices stayed depressed at $2. 25s. After costs and payments, he posted his first loss, $16,160. He'd worked all year and gone backwards. Carl went to his banker, Richard Stoltz. I need help. I need to refinance. Richard frowned at Carl's portfolio. Carl, you're leveraged heavily. If we refinance, we'll have to increase your interest rate. 5% on the operating debt. Carl felt sick, but he didn't have a choice. He refinanced $12,000, adding another $400 to his annual obligations. Nearly $40,000 per year in debt service now. Dale's 320 acres yielded 93 bushels. Weather affected everyone, but netted $30,368. Not great, but Dale slept fine. No debt. Bills paid. Money in the bank. By 1977, Carl was feeling genuine fear. Prices stabilized around $2.15, but weren't recovering. After costs and payments, $4,368. Another losing year. Carl burned through non-existent savings, deferred maintenance, cut fertilizer, stopped taking salary. His wife got a job in town as a secretary. The stress was crushing. Then 1978 brought 2 things that sealed Carl's fate. First, interest rates started rising sharply. Carl's land loan had a variable rate, something he hadn't paid attention to when signing. The rate adjusted from 9% to 11.5%. His annual land payment jumped from $25,920 to nearly $32,000. Second, his 4430 needed major repairs. The transmission was slipping. Repair cost $6,800. Carl didn't have $6,800. He'd maxed out his operating line. Went back to Richard Stoltz. No, Richard said, I can't lend you more. You're already underwater. What are you saying? I'm saying you need to make serious decisions. Sell land. Sell equipment. Something. At your current trajectory, you're going to fail. Carl left in a daze. That evening, he stood at the fence line where he'd stood so many times. Dale pulled up in his old pickup. You okay, Carl? Carl laughed. Hollow. Remember when I told you to buy a 4430? Dale nodded. Don't. Carl stared at the fields. I'm going broke. I owe so much I can't see daylight. Can you sell something? The 4430's transmission is blown. Even if I could sell it, I'd take a huge loss. Worth maybe $30,000, I owe $37,000. The land is worth less than I paid. If I sold, I'd still owe the bank after the sale. Silence. I'm sorry, Carl. Carl turned. You tried to help. You just didn't buy what I was selling. Turned out you were smarter. Carl limped through 1978 and 1979. Got the tractor fixed with an 18% personal loan. Cut costs everywhere. But commodity prices stayed depressed. Debt compounded. Interest rates kept rising. By 1980, prime rate hit 15%. Carl's annual debt service climbed over $50,000. He was farming 480 acres and losing $10,000, $15,000 per year. Spring 1979, he stopped at Dale's one last time. Found him rebuilding the 720's carburetor. That tractor's got to be 25 years old. 21, actually. Bought it used in '63. Does it ever break down? All the time, but I can fix it myself. Parts and time, no dealer bills. Silence. I wish I'd listened to you back in '74. Carl, you didn't know. None of us knew prices would fall like this. Carl shook his head. My dad knew. He told me never to borrow money I couldn't pay back in 2 years. I didn't listen. I thought I was smarter than the old generation. June 1979, Carl received a letter from the bank. 90 days delinquent on land, 60 days on equipment, immediate payment demanded or foreclosure proceedings would begin. Carl didn't have the money. He hired a lawyer, tried to negotiate, but the bank was under pressure from federal regulators to clean up bad agricultural loans. They weren't willing to work with him. October 1979, foreclosure started. April 1980, everything went to auction. Dale attended, not to bid, but to bear witness. He watched his neighbor's life liquidated in front of bargain hunters and grateful farmers. The 4430 with 3,200 hours and rebuilt transmission sold for $26,000. Someone got a hell of a deal. The planter, $4,000. The 160 acres, Carl bought for $2,000 per acre, sold for $1,300. After applying proceeds to debts, Carl still owed $48,000 on an unsecured deficiency judgment. He declared bankruptcy 3 months later. Carl moved to Omaha, got a job as a parts manager at a truck dealership. Never farmed again. His wife divorced him in 1982. The stress, the shame, the financial destruction, it killed the marriage just as surely as it killed the farm. Through mutual acquaintances, Dale heard Carl blamed himself entirely. I thought debt was a tool, Carl reportedly said. Turns out it's a noose. But here's what you need to understand. Carl's story wasn't unique. Between 1978 and 1985, over 235,000 farms failed. Farm debt exploded from $50 billion in 1970 to over $200 billion by 1980. Land values peaked in 1981, then collapsed by as much as 60% by 1987. Interest rates spiked above 20% by 1981. Corn dropped below $2 per bushel. Soybeans fell to $5. Farmers who'd borrowed to expand found themselves in an impossible situation. They owed more than their assets were worth, couldn't generate enough revenue to service debt. Banks foreclosed at rates not seen since the Great Depression. The emotional toll was staggering. Farm auctions became community tragedies. Suicide rates among farmers spiked. Rural mental health organizations were overwhelmed. The economic structure of rural America fundamentally changed. The farms that survived? Either very large operations with enough scale to absorb losses, or small to medium operations with little to no debt. The middle farms, moderate-sized operations that had borrowed to expand, were wiped out. Dale survived because he had no debt. In the worst years, when corn fell to $1, $70, and Dale's 320 acres only netted $15,000, he survived. He couldn't have made a $40,000 debt payment on that. Nobody could, but he didn't have to. His equipment was paid for. His land was clear. He tightened his belt and waited. By 1987, when the crisis finally ended, Dale was still there, still farming. Here's what needs to be said clearly. Dale wasn't smarter than Carl. He wasn't a better farmer, didn't work harder. His land wasn't better. His luck wasn't better. The only difference? Dale refused to take on debt. That's it. That one decision, repeated year after year, resisting pressure from dealers, neighbors, the entire culture, saved him. Dale's 92 now, long retired, still living on the original farmstead. His grandson farms the land with modern equipment, all paid for. Dale told me, when Carl lost his farm, I felt terrible. I wondered if I should have tried harder to talk him out of it, but nobody would have listened. Carl thought I was a fool for not modernizing. The culture was so strong, everyone telling you to borrow, expand, get bigger. It was almost impossible to resist. The only reason I resisted was because I'd seen my father almost lose everything in the 50s. That fear was stronger than my desire to impress neighbors. Let me bring this to today because the patterns haven't changed. Only the numbers got bigger. Today, a new tractor costs $450,000. A combine, $650,000. Modern operations require $2 million in equipment, and dealers make it seem manageable. Look at the monthly payment, only $3,500 over 10 years. But they don't talk about what happens if prices drop. Don't mention the $200,000 in total interest you'll pay. Don't discuss the psychological burden of knowing one drought, one price collapse, one equipment failure could unravel everything. The pressure to keep up with neighbors? More intense now than the 1970s. Social media made it worse. Young farmers see pictures of brand new tractors, state-of-the-art combines, immaculate shops, and feel like failures running 20-year-old equipment. But what they're not seeing is the debt behind those shiny machines, the sleepless nights, the maxed credit lines, the constant stress. Carl Hoffman wasn't a cautionary tale about farming badly. He was a cautionary tale about farming the way the agricultural industry tells you to farm. He did everything right according to conventional wisdom. Borrowed to expand, upgraded to modern equipment, followed agronomic recommendations, farmed efficiently, and it destroyed him. Dale did everything wrong according to that same wisdom, refused to borrow, ran old equipment, farmed small, ignored pressure to modernize, and he survived. The lesson isn't that all debt is bad. The lesson is that debt eliminates flexibility. And in agriculture, where you can't control prices or weather, flexibility is survival. If you can absorb 2 or 3 bad years without going bankrupt, you'll probably be fine long term. If you can't, you're gambling you'll never have bad years in a row. In farming, that's a bet you'll eventually lose. High debt plus bad conditions equals failure. Low debt plus bad conditions equals survival. That's the whole story. If you're farming now, thinking about it, or advising someone who is, learn from Carl's mistake. Don't let a neighbor's new tractor convince you that you need one too. Don't let financing pitches convince you debt is normal. Don't let agricultural culture convince you you're falling behind if you're not constantly upgrading. The farmers who sleep well are the ones who don't owe money. The farmers who lose sleep are servicing debt and praying for good weather and high prices. Which one do you want to be? Dale still has that 1958 John Deere 720, by the way. It sits in his grandson's machine shed, fully restored, functional. It's 66 years old now, outlasted the 4430 Carl bought, which was probably scrapped years ago after being run into the ground by whoever bought it at auction. The 720 is slower, less powerful, less comfortable, but it doesn't owe anyone a penny. And it's still there, still part of a farm that's been in the same family for over 130 years, because one man understood something. Carl learned too late. The newest equipment won't save your farm, but staying out of debt might. What would you have done in 1974 if you were Dale? Would you have had the strength to resist when your neighbor was showing off his new tractor, telling you you were being left behind? Or would you have done what Carl did, what most farmers did, and borrowed to keep up? Be honest in the comments. And remember, it's easy to say you do the right thing when you know how the story ends. But in the moment, when everyone around you is borrowing and expanding, and you're the only one saying no, that takes courage most people don't have. Dale had it. Carl didn't, and that made all the difference. If this story opened your eyes to the real dangers of agricultural debt, hit that subscribe button right now. This channel exists to preserve these hard lessons, so future generations don't repeat the same devastating mistakes. Every video takes weeks of research because I believe these stories can save farms and families. Share this with a young farmer being pressured by dealers to take on massive debt. Show them what happened to Carl Hoffman. Show them what Dale did differently. Maybe they'll resist the pressure and build something sustainable instead of something that looks impressive but collapses at the first sign of trouble. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.